Hi, my name is Cade Metz. I'm a senior writer here at Wired, and am happy on this sunny San Francisco morning to answer any questions you have about one of my main areas of coverage, artificial intelligence, which may or may not mean a lot to some people. We actually have one question already in. Could you explain, it says, what the core of AI is? I think I get the gist of that question. AI is, in a lot of ways, it's just advanced computer technology that will one day filter into the machines that we use. But it can be a difficult idea to pin down. And one way to describe it, this technology, which is actually rapidly changing the way our computers work, is to talk about this visit I recently made to Korea to watch a machine, an artificially intelligent machine that Google had built to play one of the top humans at the ancient game of Go. Go was invented in China about 2,500 years ago. Since the dawn of the computer age, this has been one of the holy grails of artificial intelligence research, to build a machine that could beat one of the top players at Go. Over the past 20 or 30 years, we've seen machines beat the top humans at checkers and at chess, at Scrabble and Othello, and even Jeopardy. But Go had stood tall. It wasn't something that machines could beat, and indeed, many people thought it would be at least another decade, if not more, before we could build a machine that could beat Go. It's a game that's kind of like chess, but it's in fact far more complicated. The average number of moves at any given point in a game of chess is about 35. With Go, there are 250, and that means it's exponentially more difficult to play, or more complicated than chess. With chess, the top players can almost systematically, and indeed many cases systematically, look ahead in the game 5, 6, 7 moves down the road. In Go, it's a little different. The top players play by intuition almost. They play based on how the board feels, how it looks. And so if you want to build a machine that really tops a human player, one of the very best human players in the world, you need to at least duplicate that kind of human intuition. And that is what these Google researchers working out of a lab in London called DeepMind have done. They use a technology, or at least one of the technologies they're using is called deep learning. And it's a technology that is rapidly changing so many of the things that you do every day online. It helps recognize faces on Facebook. It recognizes the commands you speak into an Android phone. It helps drive the Google search engine. Roughly speaking, deep learning, or deep neural networks as they are called, learn by analyzing vast amounts of data. So if you feed several million cat photos into a neural network, it can learn to recognize a cat. If you feed millions of spoken words into a neural net, it can learn to recognize those spoken words. And with this Go playing machine, initially what they did is they fed about 30 million Go moves into a neural network, and it learned to play the game of Go, which is remarkable in and of itself, that this machine is learning to play Go largely on its own. You do have to have a good data set to do this, but once you build a neural network, the machine does learn to play on its own. But in theory, that only gets you a machine that can play Go as well as a human, because it's learning based on human moves. What these Google researchers did on top of this is basically pit this neural network against itself, and it would play hundreds, thousands of games against itself and generate what are completely inhuman moves. and track how well these moves performed. This is called reinforcement learning. In the end, you build this enormous corpus of moves that come only from a machine, and then you can take those, and this does get complicated, but you feed that into a second neural network, and it can learn based on these very inhuman moves and essentially reach a level of play that no human has or potentially could. And this is the machine called AlphaGo that Google took to Korea to play one of the world's best Go players, a guy named Lee Sedol, who's Korean himself, and is largely regarded as the best Go player of the last 10 years. They played a match of 5 games, and AlphaGo, the Google machine, won the first 3 to take the match and do something, again, that people didn't think was possible for at least another decade. That is a good way of describing what at least a type of artificial intelligence is. In this case, it's machine learning, which is the common term, a machine learning to do things on its own. It can be, and it is for a lot of people, a scary thing that, and this was evident in Korea, that this machine could beat someone who seemed so infallible before the match, someone who seemed to kind of embody the human spirit, and he's defeated by this machine. It is a frightening thing. People even worry that these types of technologies can spin outside of our control. But there are so many other ways of looking at this. Lee Sedol ended up coming back and winning Game 4 and made a close contest of it in Game 5. And what he said by the end of this match is that in playing this machine, he himself found that he was open to new ideas, that he learned to play the game in a different way. Others, at least one other who has played this machine, a guy named Fan Wei, the European champion, says the same thing, that although it is upsetting that they were beaten by machines, the machine has, in a sense, opened up their minds. The inhumanity is feeding a new kind of humanity. There are so many issues to discuss here. It looks like we've got a few more questions coming in. The first one is a common question when it comes to AI. Can AI truly be self-aware? Not at this point. There are people who believe, well, right now we have a machine based on neural networks and the technologies that can play the game of Go. It can recognize photos, as I said. It's making some progress with what's called natural language understanding, where machines learn to understand the natural way that we humans speak, the natural way that I'm talking now. But we're not even there yet with natural language, although there has been progress made. There is a trajectory towards something bigger. Some people believe that these deep neural networks, if we have enough data and we have enough processing power, and processing power isn't the big problem anymore, that we can achieve something like human common sense. That, if it is possible, is an awfully long way off, and a machine that is completely self-aware is even a different matter beyond that. So no, we do not have self-aware machines, and if that is possible, it's not going to happen anytime soon. Another question that's coming in: what are the main barriers to widespread adoption of artificial intelligence? Well, the fact of the matter is that we already have widespread adoption. Like I said, this is what, if you use Facebook, which you're obviously doing right now, if you upload a photo to Facebook and it suggests that you tag it with the name of your brother or your sister, your mother, your father, a friend of yours, it's using these neural networks, these machine learning algorithms to recognize their faces. Feed enough photos of your mother into this neural network, and it can learn to recognize your mother. When you speak commands into an Android phone, it works in much the same way. It's a neural network that has learned to identify human speech. The Google search engine one of the most popular apps on the planet. The number 3 signal now driving the Google search engine are these deep learning neural networks. But it's only going to go further. Google, among so many others, is now experimenting with reinforcement learning and deep learning to help drive robotics. You can teach a robot to, say, pick up items using this same basic technology. So it's not too much to say that we do have widespread adoption, but we are at the very beginning of this curve, and I think a lot of these technologies will only be more prevalent in the years to come. There are many obstacles. Some people question, how far we can really get with natural language understanding, for instance, which is the next big frontier here. It's worth remembering that Go is as complex as it is. It's just a game. There are boundaries. There's a clear winner and a clear loser. Life, the real world, isn't like that. There aren't always clear winners and clear losers. It's far more complicated even than the game of Go. But we are on a path towards much wider adoption. What are the most practical applications of AI right now? Well, again, recognizing photos, say on Facebook or other social networks, Google's photo app. But there's a more interesting result to that same research, which is already starting to play out. If you can recognize what is in a photo, you can then generate, in essence, a caption for that photo. And that is already helping people who are sight impaired on Facebook. Facebook has released a service which, used in tandem with a voice synthesizer on phones, can generate a caption for a photo and then, in essence, speak it out loud through the phone. It allows people, and there are many, many people already, thousands, tens of thousands of people who use Facebook, although they're sight impaired. Now they can use Facebook in an even more advanced way. In the past, they just knew that a photo, many people just knew that a photo had been posted, and maybe they had a little bit of information, maybe the caption that the person who posted the photo could be read aloud. But now, even with photos that don't have captions, the system can automatically generate one. It's not a perfect caption at this point. It's just names of objects. You can say whether or not a photo is inside or outside. You can give a little bit more information, not a lot, but a little bit, to people who are using Facebook. You can see down the road where this could be applied in far more advanced ways. If you are sight impaired, and years down the road, you could have a camera that can capture what's going on around you, and you could have that kind of recognition in real time, and have the scene, in essence, spoken to you as you're walking down the street. Baidu, the Chinese search giant, what people call the Google of China, is already working on a system called DoLight that does this type of thing. Again, it's early, but they're definitely walking down that path. Next, how do you feel about the portrayal of AI in science fiction? Well, I mean, that's a broad question, but I don't know, what's interesting is that a lot of the types of issues that have been explored in sci-fi, are coming to fruition. These types of things, and there are sci-fi is a necessary thing because it allows us to explore not only the logistics of the types of things that we're going to encounter down the road, but the ethics of them. And I think that's another important thing to think about here is that as these technologies advance, there are all sorts of ethical questions to think about as well. These same sorts of questions that we've that we've dealt with in sci-fi for so many years. The self-driving car is a good example. Um, there are so many like old philosophical thought experiments that now are heightened in a way because we have things like self-driving cars. What do you do if a self-driving car has to make a decision where it has to choose between one accident and another, the life of one person and another? These are all things that seemed distant in the past when it came to science fiction, but now they're becoming very real. I think in a lot of ways the recent advancements show that the science fiction that we have read in the past isn't as ridiculous as maybe we thought it was. Why is everyone so nervous when discussions of AI come up? One of the ways I like to think about this is when this question comes up, and it does come up a lot, is to try to take people to this scene in Korea amidst this match between AlphaGo and Lee Sedol, where in the beginning it was very much an open question: was the machine going to win, or was Lee Sedol going to win? And Lee Sedol was quite confident. He was sure he would win 5-0, or at the very least 4-1. That's what he said at the pre-match press conference. The designers of AlphaGo were confident in their machine. They weren't completely open about how confident they were. I think they had, for instance, what's called an ELO rating for their machine, a rough gauge of how well it would stack up against someone like Lee Sedol. But they were confident, certainly. But it was an open question. And then Lee Sedol lost the first game, and then he lost the second, and he lost the second in this way that was particularly telling. There was this move in the second game, move 37 by AlphaGo, that was very much an inhuman move. It was a move that no human would make, and it really, judging by his reaction, really flummoxed Lee Sedol. And he lost that game as well, and there was a real sadness there, and part of it was that Lee Sedol is Korean, and we were in Korea, a country where about 8 million people play Go. He's a national figure, and so one of their own, so to speak, had lost to this machine, and there was a real sadness, but it wasn't. As someone who is Korean told me the next day, it wasn't just about the fact that he was Korean. It was about the fact that he was human. And I think whether you care about Go, or you care about tech in general, or reading about tech, or writing about tech, there's something that really affects people when you start to talk about. And maybe this gets back to the question about science fiction. When you start to talk about a machine outdistancing a human. When you talk about a machine doing things that a human can't do, I think it's fundamentally a sad thing. It's fundamentally a frightening thing. And even though these systems that we're talking about here, deep learning, reinforcement learning, and others, even though they are well within the control of their designers, there's no danger that AlphaGo is going to spin out of control and do things that that are harmful, that we can't deal with. It's not an issue with the technology today, but there is this worry that as we progress to these other levels, as we progress to natural language understanding, and then on to common sense, who knows how far we'll get, but the worry is that we will cross a threshold somewhere where this machine, and we don't realize that it's crossed the threshold, where it spins out of our control, and we can no longer, and this is of course another common theme in sci-fi, that we can no longer rein it in. That, if it ever is a danger, it's not a danger right now, but I think that rightly so, people like Elon Musk, who has been the biggest voice when it comes to this issue, warn that we really need to start thinking about these things now. so we aren't caught off guard when that threshold arises. I think that's certainly well worth thinking about, even at this early stage. You don't want to go too far with this, but certainly you have to be aware of it, and I think that people are, and I think that's because of that, that very human quality that we are almost inherently nervous and even saddened by these things. If you talk to Demis Hassabis, who oversees DeepMind, the Google lab in London that built AlphaGo, he will tell you that during the match with Lee Sedol, even he wanted Lee Sedol to win at least one game at one point. Even he, felt that kind of sadness. I think all of us feel that on some level, even the people who are building this technology, and I think it's a real concern. It may even be a heightened concern if you're the one building these technologies. More questions coming in. Where will AI be in 5 years? Well, who knows? But things are certainly accelerating. Deep learning is actually a very old idea. It dates back to the early to mid 80s. The trouble is that back then, and even through the 90s on into the 2000s, we didn't have the processing power that we needed to analyze these enormous amounts of data. And but now we do, and that was the sea change. And what happened was this idea, this technology, which grew out of academia, was seized on by the giants of the tech world. That's Google, that's Facebook, Microsoft, Baidu is another. A lot of these people who had developed this idea in academia were brought into these very large tech companies, and that has just accelerated its growth. Inside these companies, it has become a primary focus, if not the main focus. This was evident, again, I keep going back to Korea, but it was very evident in Korea that almost the entire Google brain trust was there. Eric Schmidt, the chairman and former CEO, was there. Sergey Brin flew in mid-match to watch, and what they will tell you is that they were there, at least in part because they were fans, but it also showed how important this technology is to the future of this company, which is perhaps the most powerful internet company on earth. It's just as important to Facebook. These are general technologies that can drive so many different things. And as these companies, and so many others, Elon Musk, who I mentioned earlier, has started his own AI research lab called OpenAI, and has nabbed many of these top researchers from inside Google and Facebook and from other places. And his whole idea is to take the research that they do and share it with the world at large in an effort to even further accelerate the progress of this. And that might seem odd for someone who is also so worried about the consequences of AI, but his rather counterintuitive logic is that if you put this in the hands of everyone, if you give everyone the power, rather than just say a Google or a Facebook, that you can kind of keep things in check, or at least come closer to keeping them in check. It's a complicated thing. Google and Facebook share a lot of what they do in an effort to accelerate things. And, it's not as if everything is locked inside of Google or Facebook. There are a lot of players, but in any event, the trend is, however you see this, the trend is accelerating, and so certainly this machine that plays Go, an improved Google search engine, the face recognition, is only going to move forward. People are already exploring practical applications with natural language understanding, what we call chatbots. This isn't really reality yet. You can't really go onto Facebook Messenger and really talk to a bot in the same way you would talk to a person. But that's one of the big areas of research right now, and I think in a few years we'll see big advancements there. Next question. What will be the short and long-term effects of unemployment Will we need a new approach to the economy? It's another great question and another common question. I think that there's no doubt that that this will affect jobs. Undoubtedly, I mean, if you can build a machine that can automate a task, it's going to eliminate a job, and these technologies can eliminate so many jobs. But I think that what people forget is that at these points in history where we have technology that does eliminate jobs in sometimes enormous and sweeping and rapid ways, that they also create new jobs. You can see this in sort of very obvious ways that you need people to build these systems. You need people to design them. You need people to build the infrastructure that drives them. It's driven not just by software, but increasingly new types of hardware. One example that one analyst likes to cite is there's now a parking garage in Germany where you have robots that can automatically park the cars, and that eliminates the need for a human to park the cars and retrieve them when someone comes back for their car. But what they have found is that you now need someone to repair these robots. So there is going to be a shift, and you're going to have a real change in the economy in a lot of ways. But there are jobs created in addition to being lost. And certainly, when new technologies arrive, there are going to be big changes in the way the economy works. And we'll have to deal with those. And it's another big thing that we have to think about now and not necessarily later. It's another reason that people are nervous about these types of things. Should we be making AI that behaves like humans? Well, I mean, in a way, that's kind of what we're doing, and you ask if we should be doing it. In some senses, yes. In other senses, no. One of the things that some philosophers like to talk about when it comes to this is because it's an easy example, is the self-driving car. Again, there are situations where the car, may have to decide between one horrific result and another. Humans do too, and in some senses it's tempting to think about the car completely duplicating or replacing the human there, and maybe making an even better decision than the human in those situations. But that can be equally difficult. It's hard to put these ethical and moral decisions on a machine for many reasons. Do we still want humans to be making those decisions? That creates its own complications. But there are some things where I think it's best to kind of override the AI, so to speak. Have a machine take a backseat to the human in making those really, really difficult moral questions. How does quantum computing help us reach strong AI capabilities? That's a great question. And in fact, I was just talking with someone this week about this. Google has leased a quantum computer from a company called D-Wave, and it now keeps this at a NASA research lab. It's really just a stone's throw from its headquarters in Mountain View. And this is the very problem it's trying to solve. There's a lot of debate over whether or not the D-Wave is truly a quantum computer. It's not what they call a general quantum computer. It can't do anything, but the thinking at Google is that you can apply the advantages of this quantum computer to machine learning in particular, and that's what they're trying to do. For those who aren't familiar, a quantum computer is a machine that is based on the properties of quantum physics. So very small systems, meaning an electron, a photon, that behave in these weird ways that we here in the classical physical world do not behave. Here in the world of classical physics, You have bits in a computer. A bit is either a 1 or a 0. In the quantum world, you can have what's called a qubit that can be both a 1 and a 0 at the same time. And that's a hard thing to grasp for us here in the classical physical world. But it's a very real thing. And the idea is that we can harness that sort of strange superposition of the quantum world and apply that to the way computers calculate. In theory, you could have a machine that is exponentially more powerful than the classical machines we have today. Again, this is an extremely complicated thing, but one of the things they think is that in building these quantum computers and learning to harness the strange ways that they behave, that we can apply this to machine learning and a lot of these same types of technologies that are now driving, again, these very real internet services that we use today. IBM is another company that's exploring these types of things, and again, machine learning is one of the primary applications. Security is another, but machine learning is certainly one. More questions coming in. Will medicine see a watershed moment of perfection growth through AI? Wow, I'm impressed with these questions. So this is another area where we're already seeing progress. There's a startup called Inlytic, for instance, and what they're trying to do is use these deep neural networks to, say, analyze X-rays, MRIs, and again, much like you feed cat photos into these deep neural nets, you could feed medical scans into them, and they can learn to recognize medical situations. And again, this scares people. They don't want a machine deciding what should be done to their body, but the idea is that this technology can be used in tandem with a human. Humans get tired. Doctors, no matter how talented, can make mistakes. At this point, we don't necessarily want to replace the human, but we want to, help them, augment them, have them work alongside these machine learning techniques. Demis Hassabis, who oversees DeepMind, the creators of AlphaGo, he sees that these technologies working in much the same way when it comes to scientific research, that you can use these systems to identify new areas of research where then humans can do some of the heavy lifting after that. It's not necessarily machines replacing humans, it's machines working alongside humans. Again, this is a nascent area, but it's an area where people think we will have a whole lot of progress. Joe Brown, editor extraordinaire of Wired, has just written one. Are AI researchers smart people? Are the AI researchers smart people very nervous about machines taking over the world? Joe, of course, asked a very, very good question. I think they are, and again, I think Elon Musk embodies this, right? It's strange to people that that here's this person who is at the forefront of AI research. He just started this company, OpenAI, that has, in fairly amazing fashion, taken some of these top AI researchers out of Google and Facebook. It created this new company that then wants to share all this research with the rest of the world, accelerate the progress of AI in particular, and yet he, more than anyone, has been publicly saying that we really need to worry about the consequences of this, and that seems really counterintuitive to people, but the technology is going to happen. As they like to say in the tech world, the genie is out of the bottle, and these things, as the previous question showed, the question about medicine, these things can help us in so many ways. You don't want to, put a lid on it. You want the benefits, but you want to be wary. And so what someone like Elon Musk is trying to do is advance the technology, but advance it in ways that are mostly beneficial, and hopefully find ways of putting a cap on the ways that they can be used in more harmful circumstances. But Elon Musk is not alone. A lot of people feel this way. Again, Demis Hassabis, I keep going to that moment in Korea where even he felt for Lee Sedol. He certainly sees this, and the word is that when Google acquired DeepMind, it was an acquisition in 2014, early that year. One of his stipulations, the stipulations of his teammates at DeepMind, was that Google create kind of an ethics board where they would think about these issues. This has become a common thing now. I think in some senses it's almost in some senses it can be, not necessarily with Google or with Elon Musk, but with others, a kind of marketing ploy or a bit of PR or a way of covering yourself. But it's very real in other cases where people are really worried about these issues. And even though they're building this technology, they want to find ways of dealing with the harmful effects. Next question. Why is AI not being discussed in the 2016 campaign? This is a great question. I think what we should do is we should start a movement right now to somehow get a question in front of the candidates. They're coming to California. I think Donald Trump is here today. Maybe we could, let's send Joe Brown. Let's send Joe Brown to find Donald Trump and ask him about AI. I think that's the way to go. What are we doing to avoid Skynet-like AI? Again, I think this. Let me just pause and say once again, these are great questions. I'm shocked. The Skynet thing, because all these questions tie together, right? And I think it shows how much this really hits humans. Again, science fiction is a way of exploring these ethical issues, and the Skynet thing is something that really hits home with people. An artificial intelligence that spins outside of human control and then does horrible things to humans. And so for years when I would write about artificial intelligence, inevitably you would get, almost with every story, you get this Skynet question. Again, this is extremely far off. We're not going to see Skynet tomorrow. AlphaGo is not Skynet. Google is not Skynet. But it's certainly something that we need to think about, even if it is decades down the road. These technologies are progressing so quickly that we need to think about these issues now as opposed to later, before it's too late. What do you think, Joe? Donald Trump? Track him down? He's somewhere within reach.
I'll see what I can do.
Okay, good. Who will get blamed? I'm reading this question in real time as it's being written. Who will get blamed or take the blame for AI's mistakes? Ooh, that's a tough one. This comes up a lot. During the press conferences in Korea for AlphaGo, AlphaGo made some pretty big mistakes. It made a huge mistake in Game 4 to lose Game 4. Lee Sedol made this move that AlphaGo, we found out later, assumed that a human would never make. It wasn't a possibility that it had to deal with because it knew that most humans wouldn't do it. Well, Lee Sedol is not most humans, and he made this tremendous move, and immediately with the next move, AlphaGo almost lost the game. His chances of winning dropped off the table. It was an obvious and notable mistake, and the same sort of thing happened in Game 5. And it clawed back to win in Game 5, but it does make mistakes. And in both cases, one of the big questions during the press conference afterwards to Demis Hassabis, the CEO of DeepMind, was what happens when this is used in medical situations and there's a mistake. These are things worth thinking about. Demis, hasn't even built a medical system yet, and he's almost already, in a way, getting blamed for the possibilities. I think this is, again, a huge issue with the self-driving cars. I talked to a philosopher, a guy named Patrick Lynn, here in California, just yesterday about this, and his stance is he cannot believe that Google is getting into the self-driving car game because there's no way of dealing with that problem. When something happens, they will be blamed. Others will be blamed, though. the owner of the car will be blamed, the manufacturer of the car, whether it's Google or something else, the software maker. How far do you want to go? Everyone will be blamed. There are some people who think that once we have a serious problem with say, a self-driving car, that will set back the movement years and years, and decades, because there will be so much blame passed around over the issue that it will be difficult to get back over the hump. Another one. Can AI, a computer intelligence, be good or evil? It's a good question. I think it boils down to who's using it, and this is kind of the way that Elon Musk and his collaborator Sam Altman, who created this open AI lab, where they're hoping to share all their AI research with the rest of the world, is they talk about bad actors versus good actors. They even used an Austin Powers analogy, right? What if you have a Dr. Evil? And I think that's a good way of thinking about it. What if you have a Dr. Evil who takes OpenAI's research and uses it not for good, but for something else? In a lot of ways, it's how the technology is used. Until we get to the point where the AI can evolve itself, so to speak, or control itself. That's a lot what we're asking here is who's using it and how they're using it, and that can be certainly a scary thing. We have these public companies who are driven by their bottom line in a lot of ways, building these technologies. Google's motto is do no evil, but a lot of people question that motto, and evil is in many ways in the eye of the beholder. But we do need to think about the machine being good or evil, but also we need to think about the people who are using these machines. Are they good or evil, or are their motivations good or evil, and so forth. Joe just wrote a big last question on there. I think they want me to shut up. Last question. Could AI enhance the biological brain instead of competing with it? Another brilliant question. IBM actually, in Australia, is working towards this very thing. Using these deep neural networks, and in fact a new type of processor that is particularly good at running these neural networks. They're building a system, and like so much of this stuff I'm talking about, this is very early days. They're building a system that can learn to recognize, based on EEG data, so that you're basically data describing your brain waves, what an epileptic fit looks like, in terms of brainwave data, trying to predict when that's going to happen, and warning you. And they see this eventually going even a step further, where you could have an implant where it could read your brain waves, identify when a fit is coming on, and then send electrical signals into the brain that could try to stop it. Again, this is far off. It does seem science fiction-y, but this is real research, and there are many obstacles. But a lot of this work has already been done. They've done tests in Australia where they have done implants to measure EEG data in real time, so to speak. And in fact, this is the data that was gathered that's now being fed into these neural networks to try to train them, as opposed to doctors, to recognize when a seizure is coming on. Certainly, in a way, that is a way of improving the biological brain. Again, really improving it in bigger ways, and in practical ways, is a long way off. But that's what people are working towards. All right, that should do it. Thank you.